It's been almost 6 months since my last YouTube video, and over that time I've barely done any live streaming on Twitch. I did still cast and commentate some broadcasts, but I have not been doing it with the same frequency as I normally do, and a couple of weeks ago I did a stream that kind of explained what's been going on, where I've been, etc., etc. And after giving it some thought, I've decided that I wanted to take a chunk of that stream and then put it up on YouTube as a VOD, because I felt like it was full of some pretty important discussions. I talk about my health, and I talk quite a bit about depression as well. And overall, the reality is I just felt like some of you may have not caught me live. Maybe you never get to catch me live because of time zones, whatever the case may be. But I just felt like it was worth sharing. And so with that in mind, this is going to be me explaining what's been going on with me. But before I go to the VOD, before I cut to the video, I just wanted to say that YouTube content will be coming back. I do not know in what frequency or capacity, but I do know that I will be still covering Legends of Runeterra. I want to start doing more with Path of Champions as well as traditional deck building stuff. I also will be releasing some Marvel Snap videos. I am in the beta for that. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm a Marvel nerd and a card game nerd, so it's a natural fit. And I'm finally going to dust off the Flesh and Blood channel and should have some content there in the next week or so. So with that in mind, this is again a VOD from a couple of weeks ago. You might hear me talking to chat without context because I was not recording Twitch chat at the time, but most of it is pretty self-explanatory. So if you missed it or you just find it interesting, here it is. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for watching. All right, let's see if I can figure out how to do this again. It's been so long. It's been so long that let's see if we know how to do this. Let's bring it to just me, maybe. Hey, look, there I am. It's almost like this works. It's almost like this works. Hello. Hello, Tavarish. Zombie. Lucky. Can't forget Lucky. It's Daddy. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it is in fact me. It is in fact me. So, this... Hey, Marksman. This feels good. All right, so I guess let's start from the beginning, right? It feels wonderful to be streaming again, to be in front of the camera. I'm not gonna lie to you, it feels great, but I also am nervous because I know that I'm gonna be really rusty. I have not done this in quite some time, and I miss it, but also, I don't know, it takes me a bit to get into a groove, and mentally I don't know if I'm fully there yet either, and we'll talk about that obviously. So to give you a quick rundown of what I have planned for the evening, thought it would be fun to finally go through the brain scans that I'd been teasing for a while, and as a celebration of that, if you will, if you check right now, there should be a new emote live. The Charm Brain should be up and running. In fact, I can go ahead and give this a test right now. No, it does not appear that it is up and running, so we need to fix that. Oh, there it goes. It was just delayed. It just wasn't showing up for a moment. For a brief moment on my screen, it was like, this doesn't exist. But look, it's live. Now, I will say that is the black and white version. That is legitimately one of my MRI scans. That is my brain you're staring at. So it's not just some Galaxy Brain knockoff. It's literally my brain. But I do like the idea of finding a way to like colorize that like a Galaxy Brain emote. I'm just not skilled enough in Photoshop, so I might need to find somebody to do that for me, but for now we're gonna celebrate with this. And I thought we'd go through the brain scans, talk about the health problems that I was enduring and where I'm at today, up to date. And then we'll play some Legends of Runeterra, probably pretty casually. I might even just play Path of Champions and chill because I want to do some more giveaways for the League Partner Program. But we're going to start with the just chatting as far as the, you know, stream label and things like that go, because we're going to be talking about my brain. Talking about my brain and how much I hate it and love it. So yeah, I do actually really like that emote now that I'm seeing it like in the chat. I was a little nervous that it might not be, I don't know, clear enough that that's what it is, but now that I'm actually seeing it in action, I think that it's pretty solid. I decided to keep the black background to make sure that the white popped. I was gonna, you know, try to PNG it and make it transparent, but I was concerned that depending on the background, it wouldn't show up very well, but I'm digging that. Yeah, Marksman, you get the idea. I want to colorize it, but I want, you know, I want to do it proper, and I'm not convinced that I'm the best person for that job. So since we have a lot to talk about, you get to see the consequences of years of big brain plays. Maybe, I don't know. Since we have a lot to talk about, I guess let's start with discussing the health problems, and then we'll look at all my fun pictures. Or maybe we'll do a little bit of both along the way. I don't know what the best way to navigate this is. I did not think this through clearly. I just knew that this was what I wanted to do. But all right, so for months now, I have been experiencing a very weird but specific kind of headache. And it was very concerning because of previous health problems that I have talked about on stream and on podcasts and other things like that. So I guess maybe if you're new and you're not familiar, we'll start there, because I don't really hide my health problems, but I also don't talk about them often. It's just kind of like when they come up and when they're relevant. So it's not like I harp on it all the time. Because quite frankly, I just feel like most people don't care. Or if you do care, it is, again, kind of contextually relevant. And I don't want to be the kind of person that, I don't know, it just seems like I'm harping on something or using it as a crutch or whatever, right? So there's a number of things that are wrong with me at any given point. I'm a bit of a train wreck. My torn hamstring still hurts every day. My knee with the torn meniscus and hyperextending injury hurts every day. And I'm basically in constant pain from those, and I also do suffer the side effects of my blood condition. So I have something that is something I've talked about in the past, but it is colloquially called the lupus anticoagulant, but that's a misnomer. It's really just a phospholipid issue in my blood. But the short version is it makes me prone to clots, and it also can sometimes make me very foggy as far as like my thoughts, my train of thoughts, which is very difficult when you do live streams, and even more difficult when you're trying to cast things. So it does sometimes impact me there, and it's very frustrating to navigate. But the making me prone to clots is the scary part, because in the past I've had a TIA, and if you're not familiar with what that is, that's like a stroke that doesn't cause permanent damage. And so anytime I have numbness, or anytime that I have localized pain, concentrated to just one side of my body, for example, it becomes a cause for concern, because I literally at any given moment, I'm constantly thinking like, all right, well, is this the moment where like I'm finally having a stroke? You know, is this the big one? So that leads me to the stuff from the you know, months ongoing now, which is I've been having a very specific headache that is new to me. Throughout my life, I've basically had three kinds of headaches prior to this. Traditional, what I call traditional sinus headaches, which are, you know, I'm sick or allergies are going off or whatever, and I can literally feel the pressure in my head, and it feels like an outward pressure, and then that causes pain. Very familiar with how those feel. This is not that kind of sinus headache. Very rarely I get what I traditionally think of or associate as migraines. Those are something that usually hurts more like in the back of my head, and I become sensitive to light, and kind of makes like my eyes hurt, but this is also not that, and I don't get those very often. but this headache didn't feel like that. The third kind of headache is something I only felt once. I was 8 years old and I was playing out in like 100-degree weather and not drinking water, and I was like in a kiddie pool or something. So the short version is I got heat stroke and I felt like I was gonna die. I literally passed out. My head was on fire, but that was a different kind of headache, but it was a one-off thing and it was very clearly heat stroke. So those are what I usually describe as like the 3 kinds of headaches that I've experienced throughout my life. And right around like the turn of the year, I slowly but surely started to experience a 4th kind of headache, and it was slow starting, right? Intermittent, wasn't super painful, but was definitely noticeable when it started, and it was localized, and so hence the concern. So I got, you know, headphones on or whatever, but basically here in my temple area, like above my ear, kind of, if you can imagine where your jaw would terminate, right? Your jawbone. So I don't even know what this looks like on the stream. I can't see it. I probably look like I probably look like an idiot or like a fish trying to eat my microphone. But like, if you imagine your jaw opening, right at the top part of where your jaw connects, right, like in that very similar area on only my left side, I started to experience it's a bit of a burning pain, but it also feels what I would describe as like a crushing pain. It feels like there is a vice. Okay, so it's not like outward pressure. It feels like something right on my skull, essentially right on the bone area, is just like vicing in. But it started very small and just kind of consistent, and so I was concerned, but it wasn't a bad headache, so I kind of just dealt with it, right? Didn't really talk about it, didn't really take any meds for it. Just kind of endured because I'm in pain all the time, right? Again, like my legs always hurt and other parts of me always hurt, and I'm, let's be honest, not getting any younger. So I just was like, okay, well, this is my life now. But the problem was it started progressively getting worse and worse, and it was making it very hard to focus, and I was becoming more and more irritable. And so when those things happen, one, I'm already struggling against the the phospholipid issue, but then when I'm also in pain and I'm irritable, I don't really want to stream because I want to be at a minimum a place where viewers can hang out and not feel stressed, right? So I don't want to be snappy. I don't want to be in a bad mood. I don't want to throw off your vibes. Even if I'm not going to say I'm, at the top of my game, entertaining the place to be, I don't want to ruin somebody's night, right? So if I can't think straight and I'm irritable and whatever, I tend to not want to stream. And so that's why at the beginning of the year, I was streaming a little, but it was very intermittent. And that was because the headaches were like slowly starting to ramp up. But then eventually they just like kept ramping up, right? Getting worse and worse and worse. And the pain was getting more and more intense. And then I started noticing other weird side effects. So my left eye started spasming a lot, kind of like uncontrollably, but again, only the left side. So again, that like localized cause for concern. And then the one that was the big concern eventually was I started feeling my pulse, and it was not just like in my temple. So many people feel their pulse in their head, and specifically in their temple. Most often it's like at night when you're laying down, your head's on your pillow or whatever, you get the pressure there. That's not uncommon, and I'm familiar with that sensation. What started happening though was very specifically, and there's like an artery vein combo that follows this path. From the top part of my head, I could feel my pulse come down, go like up over my ear, down, or kind of like around, and then terminating at the back of my head. And I was feeling this at different parts of the day, right? Not just when I was laying down. And then again, because things were progressively getting worse, I got to the point where I was just feeling it all the time. And let me tell you, I don't think human beings are meant to feel their pulse at all times, because it is very distracting. So if I was already having a hard time thinking before, once I got to the point where I was feeling my pulse in my skull, it was very uncomfortable. The pulse itself wasn't painful. The vice part was definitely getting very painful by that point, but the pulse thing, it just felt like there was like a worm crawling around in my skull. Like, I don't know how else to put it. Like, it is not something that you want to just experience. Like when you're trying to go through your work day, just like your normal, like I'm sitting down, I'm doing some coding or something. And like, it feels like there's, you know, squiggly fluid running through my skull. It's just kind of maddening. And it kept getting worse and worse. And then, at that point, I feel like the other symptoms as they started to creep up were a bit more psychosomatic as a result of, like, I'll just be honest, like the panic of being able to feel my pulse. So I started to like get some arm pain. I started to be kind of prone to like small panic attacks, not like full on debilitating, but like, you know, my heart would start racing and things like that. And I think that those were mostly psychosomatic as a result of the pulse thing. But it became troublesome. So, you know, talked to my doctor and reached out to them, got, you know, some stuff scheduled. And then eventually, because I had to, you know, do the referral thing and, you know, insurance, you have to jump through hoops because American healthcare is amazing, by the way. Just outstanding, top tier, would never want anything else. Eventually got an MRI scheduled. And so they took some scans of my brain. Now, when I was going into it, the goal for me was 3 things, right? My mantra was no clots, no tumors, no mysteries. Now, good news is we knocked 2 of the 3 out of the park. No clots, no tumors, but then unfortunately nothing else was really showing up, so we're left with mysteries. So before we go and we look at my brain scans, I'll give you the most current up-to-date thing. They're exploring other options now. I have learned after talking a lot and extensively about different kinds of headaches with my doctor, that there are, I guess, some migraines that literally last for months, which is not something I wanted to hear. And they suspect that it could be something like that. There's also cluster headaches and a few other weird anomalies that they talk about. The good news is, and the reason that I, you know, decided to finally come back to the streaming thing is that my symptoms have been slowly receding, right? So before I was just either in pain, you know, all day long or for good chunks of the day. Now I still get headache flare-ups, but it might only last like an hour. The pulse sensation has calmed itself down as well. So my clarity of thought is slowly coming back, which is, again, kind of necessary for the whole streaming thing. But ultimately, I just needed to get back to a point where I wasn't going to ruin the experience for everybody, right? Like, again, I want people to, at a minimum, be able to have a relaxed time, you know, and I don't want to show up and be irritable and kill the vibe. So the symptoms are receding, but they're not all the way gone. We are actively monitoring them, and my doctor has talked about, you know, if they don't all the way go away or if they do start to come back, there are options that we can take. Including, so one of them is, the name escapes me now, but essentially there is a medication that they prescribe to people that is an anti-seizure medication, but they also prescribe it sometimes in the case of chronic headaches, and people will find that it prevents or relieves them. And they don't want to put it on me, excuse me, brain's going a little bit faster than my mouth, and again, I'm still not fully mentally clear yet. They don't want to put me on it, is what I mean to say, until we kind of ride this wave, because if it's not necessary, they don't want to put me on anti-seizure medication if I don't absolutely need it. They've also cleared me for certain kinds of pain meds that I can take to hopefully relieve the symptoms. Part of the issue with the blood condition that I have that makes me prone to clots is there are some medications that I'm supposed to avoid for pain. So, like, for example, they don't have me quite on blood thinners, but I take aspirin every day as a, you know, blood thinner option. And so, like, I can take increased aspirin. There's a couple of NSAIDs that I can take as well, but they also don't want me taking too much because of some of the other issues that, like, large doses of aspirin continually over time can cause. And so, I don't know. Right now, we're just kind of riding the wave, exploring the options. The seizure medication is, like, on the table, but, you know, we're not quite there yet. I also had something else, and we'll see this in the pictures, come up and get diagnosed, and I've been referred to an ENT specialist. But I have to get on allergy medication for at least 2 weeks before I follow up with them. Actually, they called me while I was on my work trip, and I have to call them back so that I can at least get tentatively on this schedule. Was it? No, neither of those zombie are looking familiar. Hey, Capitan. Yeah, I also still miss the Elder Scrolls Legends days, but yeah, neither of those. Topamax might be it. That one rings a bell, or at least it might have been one of the ones that was mentioned in passing. But so I have that, and then like I said, we'll see here in a minute because we're gonna pop up the brain scans. I also have some pretty rough sinus issues, and I've had them my whole life, but I have a tendency to just deal with it. I am very bad about this, and I strongly encourage you to not be like me, and especially if you do not live in the United States. If you live someplace where you actually have access to healthcare, don't follow my example. But I am the kind of person who, the best way that I can describe it is I will drive with my check engine light on, but take that, analogy and apply it to my body. So like if I know something is wrong, but it is not enough to like cause a breakdown, I just kind of keep going. So I've known that I've had sinus issues for a long time, but this MRI kind of, shows that off a bit. So without further ado, let's jump into looking at some of these fun brain images here. Love that beard. Well, thank you, CK. All right, so I've got literally hundreds of images of my brain. Now, we're not going to go through every last one, or if we do, we might scroll through some of them pretty quickly. But they did them in a series of scans. I did them with contrast and without contrast, right? So you are also going to notice that there are different angles, right? So this is very clearly, I don't know if this one is officially top down or bottom up, but it's, you're looking this way at my brain because you can see the nose here, right? This is sadly as big as I can get it at the moment here, but so this is the start, and you're gonna notice as I go through some of these that I've got a right side nostril area and a left side nostril area as far as the sinuses go, and at different stages you're gonna notice that one side is like drastically inflamed, and that my sinuses are just like that all the time. That always happens. So depending on like which way I tilt, and definitely like if I lay down at night, then like one side will just always plug up. And this is also why I've like dealt with sinus headaches for a long time. They have referred me to an ENT to potentially take care of this, but well, so as far as the sinus thing goes, if I'm going for surgery, it would be my doctor explained that there's something back in my nose that can sometimes become overactive or enlarged, and then that will create an excess amount of mucus and cause this sinusitis that we're going to see. And they did mention that surgery can sometimes be an option for addressing it, but until I rule stuff out. So like step one is they want me to be on an allergy medication for at least 2 weeks, and then when that has passed, I go in to see the ENT. ENT is going to run me through a gamut of tests, but they want me on the allergy medication so that by the time I get in to see the ENT, they want to rule out that it's just allergies. And then the ENT will assess me, and if it is that, then surgery is an option. But everything moves slow in American healthcare. So as we go, this is my bug eyes. This is my bug eyes, right? You can see fun. Now this thankfully is like not actually something, and you can see that there's like some misshapen stuff, but for the most part it's nothing to be concerned about. And so then like as it progresses down, you can see that here everything actually evens out, right? Like this is just happens to be at this angle, it looks darker here, but then as you go fuller, it's the crab from Moana, kind of. And then we're going, I think that we started at the bottom, we're going up because now we're like past the eyes. This is going to be like top parts of the brain. So this is proof that I do at least have a brain, right? And now we're going sideways. And then this is start of my profile. And it's so funny because like I can look at this profile and this is me. Like I know that this is me. Or it's my brother. My brother has a very similar profile to this, but my nose is a bit more prominent than him. So I would, if you were asking me, like I would have bet that this is me, but this is definitely me. But we can see the mouth going here. Look at this big old tongue. And then this next one. So this is the one that is now the emote. So this is the actual image that pops up when you use that charm brain emote now. I went with this one because this one had, you know, the biggest pop in terms of detail. You can see all of my folds, my actual big brain thoughts here. And then here is where we start to get spooky. This is a bit more skeletal. This is what I like to think of as my Voldemort image, right? Because now my nose is gone, my teeth are a bit more here. Like if you had said like, hey, this is an MRI of Voldemort, I would believe you. This looks pretty spot on. Looked a bit smooth. I mean, this is pretty smooth. You're not wrong. This looks pretty smooth. This could be a bit more wrinkly, but. So we're on to Voldemort, and then as it progresses and continues through, now we're back to the crab from Moana. Yeah, I've got other MRIs, like when I jacked up my knee, for example, I did that. But when I went to do this, I specifically asked for these pictures, and sadly, all the other X-rays and MRIs I've done, I didn't ask for them. But when I went in for this, I was like, all right, one of two things is going to happen here. Either like I'm going to die or I'm going to have something that I can laugh about later. And if it's the latter, then I'm going to turn pictures of my brain into Twitch emotes because that's what healthy adults do as a coping mechanism, you know? So yeah, I literally, I was like, I'm not leaving till you give me my images on a disc. And that's what I did. But yeah, this is not spooky at all. And then we're looking at the back. Just fun stuff. And this is, you know, again, some of these. Here you can clearly see my vertebrae, which I actually think is pretty neat. I don't know how well it's coming through on your end as far as the stream, but like I know that right here I can very clearly see the vertebrae. It's just a bit dark, right? So if anybody ever calls me spineless, for example, I've got proof. I got those receipts. I'm not spineless. I'm just a coward. It's different. And then it continues through. And then this is where this one ends. But again, this was just batch 1. And as you can see here, we had 15 scans. Well, it's really more like 14. I can jump ahead and show you. This one was really just 3 bits, and this one was also like with the measurements, right? So this was just a short for reference batch, but we start to get at some pretty interesting angles when we go through some of the others, right? So like you start with this and you're like, I don't even know what this is, you know? Maybe this is an ear, right? The mystery. Then you're like, okay, well, is this some brain? Are we going in? Oh, there it makes sense. You know, Silverfuse is right. This looks smooth. This is not nearly spaghetti enough. All right. This is way too smooth. I need more folds in there, gang. It's actually kind of a shame because I feel like I might be a halfway bright person if I had my act together. and I didn't have blood conditions and all sorts of things that made me a bit foggy all the time. There's almost a hint of intelligence in these. So now we're into Voldemort territory again. As we go through. This one's actually probably more Voldemort. Still no nose, but you get those kind of like teethy parts. And then the nose starts to come into view. We hit that profile again. But again, the good news is no growths, right? We're not seeing any of the big abnormal growths that I was worried about, because it's so... like, the pain is so localized that I was really starting to get concerned that maybe something was growing there, and that's why I was feeling the very localized pressure. Like, legitimately, the best way that I can describe it is it just feels like there's a vice there, you know? Hello, Cosmic, and everybody coming from that stream. I appreciate you. But thankfully, as we can see, no big growths. And then we kind of outro the other direction there. House MD came to mind, yeah. Some of those are pretty close. I always wonder if whenever they do those medical dramas, whether or not they have somebody just like draw them up in Photoshop, or if they're actual images that they got like the release rights to. Be kind of cool if I could submit my own scans and be like, hey, use these in some sort of medical drama. So these ones are for the most part pretty dark until you get further in, right? I'm kind of speeding through these ones because these ones were not super clear, right? You think they get releases on images? I could see that. Here we're back to the spooky eyes, though. It's actually kind of funny because when I look at this one, and there's a couple like this, even though I know that it is, you know, this plane for where the image is being taken with the MRI, I see a face. Like, these are the eyes, and it's like somebody's rolling their eyes, and then this here is like the mouth and the nose, right? Like, this could be just a face of somebody going, oh, like this could almost be a braingasm. This is very close to like a braingasm face to me. But again, these ones are not necessarily as clear as the first batch, but they were looking for different things. Like I said, they did them with and without contrast, because you'll notice in some of these later ones, there's a heavy emphasis on like the vessels, because they were also concerned about clots. And so like this is one of them. Don't know how clear it's going to end up being at home. I wish I had a, can we, yeah, I was going to say, let's zoom in. I was just thinking to myself, I wish I had a way to zoom in, and then I realized, oh yeah, that's right, I can. So here we can see a lot of the kind of like vessels, right? And so these were where they started to look for the clots. I think the problem with the zoom in is now I can't easily go through, because it literally zooms in, and so then my little arrow is gone. Yeah, that's a wee bit lame. I think I can actually just do it with the arrow keys here. Maybe? No? Even if I do this, it doesn't really get that much bigger, does it? That's a bit lame. Yeah, space might do it, zombie. Let's try getting it big again and see if space does it. No, because space is just entering whatever your last thing was, right? So like me hitting space either is enlarging. And again, there's not there's not an option for me to easily pan through. So that's a bit of a shame. Because again, once you come here, and again, we don't have more zoom options, so I guess I'll just have to zoom in when I find something that is a bit more relevant, right? So like you can kind of see as we go through where they were trying to focus on the vessels. I think this is the batch where later on you can really start to see one of my sinus issues. Here it's getting closer to the eyes. They start to get, you know, a bit more visible. I will say, when I was going through these before I spoke to my doctor, right, because I had him give them to me, I was really starting to get concerned about this because it just looked uneven, but it was just the timing, right? Like when you're laying in the thing, you're never perfectly straight. So seeing stuff that's asymmetrical like that isn't necessarily a big deal because your orientation, like even here, you can kind of see my head is like a little bit tilted. Your orientation's never perfect. And so that's why they take so many scans and so many slices, because then they can get a better feeling as they go through. And then it just slowly shrinks away as you hit the top part of my skull. Here we can start to see like where my teeth are. Ah, yeah, here's all right, we want to zoom a bit here. So you'll notice right here, this is like all filled in and this is dark, right? This is because one of these is a full sinus cavity and the other one is not. And this happens pretty routinely through my scans, and it's because of that sinusitis issue that they are going to have me see the ENT for. Now, these are not what's causing my mystery headaches, mind you. It's not in the right location, and as I've said before, I'm very familiar with how my sinus headaches feel. This is not that, but that is the start of... Again, here you can see where it's really dark versus not. So this is the start of where it starts to show. And this one, again, you're never symmetrical, but they knew it was an issue because as they were going through, it just it keeps happening kind of routinely, and it's doing it across multiple scans, right? So, something's jacked in there. And then afterwards we start to even out again. I was a bit concerned. There's a few times where you can kind of see these gaps, not really with the brain, but just kind of like that, the area that cushions between your brain and where your skull is. But I've been told that those were not a concern, but those were something that I was like, hey, what's going on here, gang? This is an egg. It's actually just the top of my skull, but I like to think of this as this is an egg. It looks like it's getting ready to hatch with these little cracks here. Part of me wants to like set this as my Twitter profile for a bit, because then I'll look like a Twitter egg, but it'll actually just be my brain. Like, I'm an egghead. Proof that I'm an egghead, gang. And then again, they did them with and without contrast, so it's a little bit more of the same. But again, this is, I think, another great example of where you can see where it's full versus not full as far as the sinus cavities go. But nothing else was out of the ordinary or of a concern. But this is my brain. And again, you can just see it all throughout, right? It's just all jacked up. This is my brain. My bug-eyed brain. This is another one of those brain-gasm ones, right? You got the eyes. Looks like they're rolling back in the head. This is like the mouth of this face. You guys got to see a face here, right? I'm not the only one who sees this. And then it just kind of disappears. And then eventually we get to an egg again. It's an egg! You can make it out? Thank you, zombie. I'm glad I'm not losing my mind. And if I did lose it, it'd be pretty easy to find because I got pictures of it. So as we're going through the rest of these, there's not much else to highlight. A lot of it is more of the same because, again, they did it with contrast, without. They took multiple shots at it. The big things to note were we didn't see any clots. We didn't see any growths. We saw the sinusitis. So now we're just exploring, again, the potential of like cluster headaches, talking about that seizure meds. So as we're going through the rest of these, I figured it would be a great time to talk about, you know, the other things wrong with my brain. So another reason that I haven't streamed in a while is that my brain, you know, it looks okay in the pictures, but it turns out my brain hates itself. So here again, you can see the blockage versus not in the sinuses. So again, something that I don't necessarily hide, but like I don't bring it up a lot on the stream, is that I suffer from a pretty long-standing chronic depression going back to my childhood. I've been seeing a therapist for quite a bit, and I'm going to be seeing another one, a new one soon. Because, you know, as I've been going through the process of diagnosis and kind of talking about it, it turns out that I've been suffering from symptoms of chronic depression since I was like 7, which is probably not good. And you know, like most things, as I've said before, if my check engine light is on, I just kind of keep driving on it. And it was the same thing with the depression for a long time, but it has started to cause a lot of problems with motivation. I mean, depression usually does, but a lot of times, like in the past, especially with content creation, you know, a lot of the times what would happen is like I would disappear for a week or two, and then I'd come back and I would make some quick-handed, you know, joke of like I fell into the depths of the darkness, and then I would never address it. And so I think that it's important. Here you can really see the blockage versus the not. I think this one's a good one. I think it's really important to like acknowledge it, right? Again, I don't want to like lean on it as a crutch or anything, but it is something that does also keep me from streaming. And specifically when I talk about like that idea of I don't want to be a detriment to your time. Like if you're going to come and you're going to attend a stream, at a bare minimum, I don't want to make your day worse. And so if I am, again, irritable, or I'm not with it, or, you know, I'm all doom and gloom, the last thing I want to do is pass that on to any of you. So a lot of times that makes me less likely to want to stream, but it also, you know, a lot of people just think that like depression is sadness, and that's not really the case. It's actually really hard to articulate because it feels like oppressive pressure at times, that's just kind of hidden, and it's a real drain on motivation, but it also is, it's not like hearing voices, mind you, but it is something that's like a voice in the back of your head that always makes you second guess yourself and doubt yourself and introduce a lot of very unpleasant thoughts. And so a lot of the time it makes it so that I don't want to spend time with myself, is the best way I know how to describe it. So like one of my long-standing coping mechanisms is that I have turned myself into a bit of a workaholic, because as long as I have a task to do, then I'm not left with my own thoughts, right? And so, you know, for those of you who maybe weren't around at the time, just to kind of give you an example, like when I got partnered with Twitch, mind you, I was streaming enough to get partnered on Twitch, right? I had an audience, I was streaming consistently, and I also was working a full-time job, and I also was teaching as an adjunct at a local university. And, you know, I've got a wife and I've got 2 kids, and I'm trying to live that life, and I'm also usually trying to go to the gym somewhat frequently. And so all of that sounds like really like impressive, but a lot of it was really just a coping mechanism for, you know, not wanting to be stuck with myself. And so I just felt like, you know, if we were going to be looking at literal pictures of my brain, I can talk about some of the things that goes on in my brain, because it really does, it weighs on you. And a lot of times what happens is unlike other afflictions, right? Like you get a cold, you can take meds for it, or you know what to do for it. Something like depression actively fights itself. As far as like fighting the treatment of it, right? It tells you that you don't need to get better, because like when you're in the depths of a depression, for example, you're kind of incapable of helping yourself. And then when you get out of it, you trick yourself into thinking that you don't need to seek help because you feel fine now, right? Okay, well, I weathered the storm. I feel fine now. Why do I need to go see anything? It'll be okay. And then it never is long term, but that's what happens. And then you also have to fight with the stigma, right? That's associated with any sort of mental afflictions. Both internally, right? Like nobody wants to admit, hey, there might be something wrong with me or something wrong with my brain chemistry. But then there's also avoidance of things like this, where you openly talk about it, which is why traditionally in the past, if I have mentioned it, it has usually been for comedic value, right? Nobody wants to talk about what's going on here in your brain. But it is something that is an issue. And it definitely affects me in all stages of my life, but it has come to the point where it really started to affect my content creation. So like a great example is you start to doubt whether or not, just a sidetrack. This is another one of those ones that where they were really putting the emphasis on the blood vessels, right? Looking for clots. So I'm going to zoom this in, right? Here you can really see where the flow is, as they were trying to diagnose whether or not I had one of those. But to go back to the other thing, it can be very hard to articulate it because, again, it's not like it's an actual voice in your head, right? It's just your own thoughts. You hear your own thoughts, and I think that's what's so hard when it comes to depression, because you're your own worst enemy, but it sounds like you, and it is you. It is a part of you. So when you're sitting around and you're like, you know, hey, you know, if I take tonight off streaming, you know, nobody's going to care, right? Like you'll say, it'll start with something like that. Nobody's going to care. It'll be fine. And then you might take like a night or two off, and then you'll also start to feed into yourself where it'll be like, well, you know, nobody reached out and said, you know, hey man, I've missed the streams lately. So that means that, you know, nobody really misses you anyway. And if nobody really misses you and nobody really cares, then like, what's the point, right? You know, streaming and content creation and making stuff for YouTube is also very numbers centric, and that feeds into it as well. So, you know, everyone says, you know, don't look at the viewer numbers, don't look at that stuff, but it's like kind of impossible to not do it, because that's also one, like it's in your face a lot, but it's also just something that gets brought up even in chat, right? If you have a good night, people say, hey, a lot of viewers, or the other way, like, hey, where's everybody at? You also see it, like, I'll be honest, right? Like you see it in your paychecks. You know, when Twitch sends you a payment, you notice if you've got a down month. If YouTube sends you a payment, you notice if your viewership is down. It's kind of unavoidable one way or the other. And so when you see those dips, it can be very easy, if you know, struggle with depression, to think that's a reflection of you as a person. And then when you expand on that even further, you know, if you disappear and nobody checks in on you, then it just feeds into it. Or on the esports side of things, right? Like with casting, you know, if you work a gig, right? And at the end, you're doing the debrief, right? You're doing the end of show, and everyone says like, hey man, great show. And you ask for feedback, and they say, yeah, there's no problems. You did great. Don't worry about it. But then you don't get hired for the next show, right? So now is it that you just weren't the right fit? Is it that they were trying to rotate in other talent to give them a shot? Or is it that they actually just lied to you and you didn't do a good job? Or is it that you did a fine job, but they just don't like you? Or all of those like thoughts start to creep in, right? And it sucks, you know? a great example is this was a very rough week for me because, it's no secret, I like Wild Rift and I want to cover it. And I got to be the desk host, which was a wonderful blessing for the first big North American event. But I did not work this second one. And it was a LAN. It was like Wisdom's first LAN. And I love the people over at Wisdom. And so like I really wanted to work it and I didn't. And then like, as if it was like some sort of cosmic insult to injury, my day job sent me to Minnesota. So like on the one hand, I was really excited to go see the show, and I went and I took pictures and I legitimately had a great time, and everybody at Wisdom killed the show. It was well set up within the mall. When I was there, to see the amount of people who, in my estimate, had never experienced esports would stop by and watch for a bit, and parents with their kids, like they would stop and their kids would see it. It was really a beautiful, like wonderful thing to see, right? Like I loved it, but it's bittersweet, right? Because I'm there and I'm there not for the show that I want to work, and I get to see how cool the show is and how much fun everybody's having. But I didn't get picked for that, right? And so then, you're traveling and you go back to your lonely hotel room at the end, and then you start wondering, like, is it because of me? Was I just not the right fit? Blah, blah, blah. And so, many times in the past when I was on the show with Justin, right, when we would do our podcast, I would say, I wake up every day and I think about quitting. And again, back then I would say it like as a joke, right? But it's also like the joke was the coping mechanism. I think about quitting all the time because I very often will start to think that nobody cares. But I know that's not the truth, right? I appreciate everybody who swings by every time. I've got some diehard regulars I absolutely adore, Tavarish and Zombie and Immortal King, and even people like Marksman, people that I see in chat all the time. Like, I know that you're there, but the thing about depression is like, you don't fight it with rational thought, right? And even when you try to fight it with rational thought, then because my depression brain is me, it's very good at outsmarting itself. Every rational idea that I can come up with, my depressed brain can come up with what sounds rational anyway, counter thought, right? So it's like constantly sparring with yourself, and it's legitimately exhausting, right? To constantly like be at war with your inner self. And so if you spend all day doing that, it can then make it very difficult to want to stream in the evenings, right? And so there are days where I wake up and I am like super excited to stream, right? And then like noon rolls around and I'm jacked, and I will even tweet, like, I know you've all seen it, where I will tweet at like 1 p.m. my time, and I'll be like, hey, we're streaming tonight. I'm ready. I am jacked. Let's do this. And then you just don't hear from me from the rest of the day. And part of that is that I am like a bit prone to self-sabotage. So another one of the things about depression is that in many ways I'm like incapable of allowing myself to be happy. This is something that I have talked about with my therapists. Anytime things start to go good, like I find a way to make it not be good. So like I'll give you an example. Well, so like post-event depression is a real thing in esports. It's even more prevalent, I think, when you do live shows and LANs, right? You go, and it is a near euphoric experience when you're working on an esports live show, because you are surrounded by a bunch of people who share the same passions and joys and energy about something that you care about. And so when you're in that environment where everybody is having a good time and you're all working toward a common goal, and I think that this is probably true even outside of esports, right? But like when you go somewhere and you're just with a bunch of people who all believe in something and you're all working on it together, it is just a really enlightening experience. I think about the times where, I think Silverfuse was in chat earlier, right? Like when we went and we did the last Master Series, and when we were there at QuakeCon, we had a blast all weekend long, right? Even when you're not on the broadcast, you're just surrounded by people who genuinely all love the same thing, and you're all working toward a common goal, and you go from those highs, and then you come home, and then it's like, well, now what? And it's not that your life at home sucks by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that you go from like this weird, it's like a feeling of working towards something more than just you, right? And then you go back to just being you. And so there is like a post-event depression that I think just naturally sets in. And I've heard other casters and other creators talk about something similar. But this is something that's beyond that. Like what my self-sabotage depression does is that I will go and I will do a show. And even if, again, in the debrief, everyone says it was great. And even if I get, you know, viewers who say, hey, you know, I really loved the show, or, you know, I think that you really nailed this bit, or whatever the case may be, I'm like incapable of hearing it. And then all I do is I think about how bad the show went. I think about all the mistakes I made. And then I start talking myself out of, again, like if I can even do it. And in some cases, it's been really detrimental. So a great example is, you know, there was a time when I was very into Valorant. I loved Valorant, and I was casting a lot of Valorant, actually. You know, granted, it was in the very early days, so everything was grassroots. There was a couple of, you know, reputable casts that I did, and I certainly cast with people that are even now like in the industry, right? But I was casting Valorant for a long time, for months. But it was a new genre. This looks like a happy face here. This is a big old smiling happy face. It was a new genre, and I knew that I just objectively wasn't as good at it as I am at covering card and strategy games, right? And I would watch other people's VODs, and I would watch my own VOD. And again, part of it is I'm my own worst enemy, and I'm my biggest critic, right? But I would watch those VODs, and I'd be like, man, I really suck. But I would put in the work, and I would try to get better, and I kept trying to do that every cast. But what kept happening was, right, I would get these Valorant gigs, and then I would get another gig, but I would be paired with a new co-caster. So I legitimately did like double-digit casts for Valorant. I actually keep track of all of the stuff that I've ever done, so I can answer my own question here really quickly. I can come in here and just look for Valorant. Yeah, double-digit Valorant casts, and I never worked with the same co-caster, right? Same partner talent more than once. It was very specifically just, you know, I'd be paired with somebody, and then on the next broadcast, I'd be paired with somebody else, and on the next broadcast, I'd be paired with somebody else. And now part of that is just that at the beginning of Valorant, there was a massive influx of people who were interested, right? You had people coming from Overwatch, people coming from CSGO, people coming from Apex, and then people like me who were just new because they really liked Valorant. So there's a lot of people to cover, right? It makes total sense. But that's not the way a depressed brain views it, right? A depressed brain views it as nobody wanted to work with me again. And a depressed brain views it as, you know, I should be able to overcome that. So not only am I trying to learn a new game, and I was trying to learn a new style of casting, because again, the cadence, the rhythm, the emphasis for certain things, it's wildly different between a card and a strategy game that's turn-based and you've got downtime versus something that is like Valorant, right? So I'm already trying to learn a new skill, and then I'm getting paired with new casters every time, right? I should be able to cut myself some slack, right? For growth, but no, absolutely not. That is not the way that my brain processed it. And so it got to the point where, even though I was still getting interest and people were, you know, hiring me for stuff, it just got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm just not good at this. And I stopped casting Valorant. And I liked it. But it wasn't like I stopped liking it or anything. It was legitimately just my brain. So anyway, I mentioned this one again because we're going through the brain scans. This is another great one where that you can see where they were putting the emphasis on trying to look for clots in the vessels. This is another good contrast one that thankfully I don't have clots for. But you know, I mention it because it was just, it's another thing that has been impeding me. It's another thing that my brain has been throwing my way as far as making content. It's not that I don't want to make content. It's definitely not that I don't want to stream. It's just very difficult to do so because, like, at the end of the day, what happens is I sit down and I think to myself, if I'm going to stream and I'm going to have a reason for people to come watch me, then I need to believe in myself, right? I need to say, hey, I think that I am at least entertaining or interesting enough that people should spend their time viewing me. And if I don't believe that about myself, if I literally just like hate being alone with myself, then how can I expect other people to do that? Right? And if I look at my content and I am unsatisfied with my own content, then how can I in good conscience say that I'm offering anything new or different or unique to you as the viewer? And again, like the issue is that a depressed brain finds all the reasons why I'm not fulfilling those things. Even though I'll get people who say like, hey man, I love your stuff, right? I still have to get over the hump with myself and say to myself that I have something to offer. And then again, there's that self-sabotage, right? Like every time things are starting to go good, I will find a reason. Here's another one where you can see the sinus issue, right? Like this is just full and then just empty. But yeah, and it just keeps happening, right? Like there was a time where I was really into Apex Legends, and I actually cast some events for Apex Legends. Again, full, not full. And I stopped pursuing that game, and it wasn't because I stopped liking Apex Legends. Hey, Jerry. And so like those are just issues that I've had them for a long time. I'm just trying to be more aware of it now, and I think that a lot of what has ultimately led me to finally talk about it beyond just the quick jokes, the passing comments that I traditionally made in the past, is that in many ways I'm hoping that this helps to hold myself accountable. Because as I said, it's not that I don't enjoy these streams, it's not that I don't enjoy making YouTube content, it's not that I don't enjoy casting. I love all of that, right? But I also I just struggle with happiness. Like that's really the crux of it, right? It's not it's just not easy. It's not easy to let myself enjoy things. In fact, most of the time I have what I call vicarious happiness, right? I feel happy when my kids are having a good time. I feel happy when my wife is happy. I feel happy when you, the viewers, are happy. And so I try to do those things, but me, and unfortunately that's where a lot of the motivation comes, right? I struggle personally with happiness, and so I don't know long term like what I'm gonna do to get over it. Like I said, I've been addressing it for a bit now, and I'm in the process of trying some new things here in the near future, so hopefully it will get better. But that is the other part, right? So when we're talking about reasons that I basically haven't streamed in like 4 months, it's because my brain hurts, and we're still figuring out why. Thankfully I'm not dying though. That's the important piece. And then my brain is also my biggest worst enemy, and so I'm hoping that I can normalize it a bit by talking about it. I'm hoping that I can hold myself accountable a bit by talking about it. You know, I don't pretend to know all of the answers now. And I know that I'm not even articulating it well enough to properly have the discussion. But I do know that it is something that impedes me. Absolutely. Long time no see since Tessel, huh? Yeah, this is the best sum up. So Zombie in chat says, so Charmer, if you got $1 million, but the person you dislike the most got $2 million, what would you do with your $3 million? And that is very much I mean, very much the best way that I know how to describe it, right? And the worst part is it's like, it's not like there's tremendous amounts of stuff to dislike when I'm able to sit in a non-clouded mind state, right? And I can actually think about things. Like, I don't even have a lot to complain about. Like, I've got a good steady day job. I've got a beautiful wife. I've got wonderful kids. I've got a stable roof over my head, right? Like, I've got so much to be thankful for. But again, like, that's just not what depression cares about. It will always find a way to make you not good enough. It will always find a way to make you miserable. It will find ways, like, even on your best days, there are times where, like, you'll just feel numb, or not even numb. Like, sometimes it's like an out-of-body experience. Like, it's almost like I'm so adverse to happiness that I don't even allow myself to experience it, right? So it's like, you know, you step back and the accolades are assigned to somebody else, right? Or the successes and things that you personally experience don't actually apply to you. And I do also find that in my career, I know this says a lot about me, right? But I use that happiness, that vicarious happiness, right? That happiness assigned to others as a way that I have, like, justified my career. So when I think about the things that I have been the most successful at, and then when I think about the things that I still kind of quote unquote enjoy as a job, right? At my last job where I was managing a team, that's great for me, because if we do well, then I can say we did well because my team did well, right? I don't have to take credit for it. But if we do bad, right? If we mess up, if we miss a deadline or whatever, then, you know, that's just extra food for the depression, because I can say, well, that's, you know, my failure, right? That falls on leadership. But then if we do well, I can push it off to the team. And it's kind of the same thing when I was teaching, right? When I was, you know, an adjunct professor, you know, if the class did well, it's because I have amazing students, right? And if people are struggling, well, then that's my fault as the professor. I feel like I gravitate toward those types of jobs because it feeds my ability to self-sabotage. And, you know, I have to be aware of that. These are things that I'm slowly coming to terms with, because I think that it's really important, if I want to dodge all of it, that I'm self-aware. So those are most of the scans. Again, we hit the big stuff early on. Again, really happy that this is now an emote, right? I think I want to do a colorized, like, Galaxy Brain version 1, but this one was clear enough, and I felt like a good enough profile that we could jam that on Twitch. So if you're new and you're just joining and you don't realize it, this is now a new emote on the channel. This is the Charm Brain emote, kind of like the Galaxy Brain, but it is legitimately a picture of me that shows up as an emote. It's the real me. And I thought that that would be pretty fun. So, where do we end? At least with this part. We're not gonna end the stream. I still got plenty of stuff to do. But where do we end on this? I would say, you know, I'm still enduring the headaches, but we're hoping that I can either get to a point where, like, I'm just back to functioning, or worst case scenario, then I have to try out that anti-seizure medicine. We'll have to wait and see. I'm on the allergy meds as I await to see if they help, or I have to go see the ENT for the sinus issue that was identified through these MRIs. And, you know, I'm seeking help for my brain hating me. But I hope to be streaming more frequently going forward, because I do miss it tremendously. And I hope to get back on board with YouTube content. I don't know if I'll be doing everyday stuff, but I want to make sure that I'm putting stuff back up. I also want to start doing more flesh and blood stuff. I know I've been saying for, you know, almost a year now that, hey, I want to make flesh and blood content, but I think I need to just rip the band-aid off and put some videos out. Like, I know I actually have a list of, like, the kinds of videos I want to make for flesh and blood, because I think that there's a number of videos that just don't exist for that game that I think would be really beneficial for the community. And so I'm actually excited at the prospect of doing those, but I got to get myself to do it, right? So that's where I want to be in the near future. I want to be streaming again. I want to be making YouTube stuff, and I definitely want to be casting again. But I got to get myself, you know, over my own mental hurdles, right? I want to still cover Legends of Runeterra. I know the future's a little bit uncertain as far as like what that's going to look like in the future. At least we know that there's going to be some form of seasonal broadcasts going forward. That was the announcement today. So that's amazing news, and I hope that I can be involved and be a part of that. I still love the game. But I do genuinely want to do more with Wild Rift. And as far as like the physical stuff goes, I would love to cover Flesh and Blood. Many of the people that I talk to regularly about Flesh and Blood are people who are already casting it. So I talk a lot with Flake, who's amazing, Tannen, and some of the other broadcast members for that. But I would like to do more with that. And then I don't know what I want to do outside of that. Like I also wouldn't mind trying to crack into TFT, but I think that as far as other Riot stuff goes, I'd maybe want to stick with Wild Rift because TFT is already really established at this point. I enjoy that game tremendously, but I feel like trying to tackle that and insert myself, I don't know. I guess it would just feel selfish. And that also might just be the depression talking. I don't know, right? But it would feel like, I don't know, too much of a me thing. I have been enjoying the Overwatch 2 beta, and there was a time when I streamed almost exclusively Overwatch, and so there is a part of me that also wouldn't mind maybe taking a crack at something like that. I liked casting Valorant when I covered that, for example, and so I'm not against covering team shooters. So maybe that's on the plate for the future. I don't know, but that's where we want to be content-wise going forward. And with that in mind, I think we're going to end the just chatting portion of the stream.